Boulder Show. I'm John Tayer, President and CEO of the Boulder Chamber, and I welcome you to another edition of Chamber Chat, where we're going to be talking this month about the effort that some have pursued, which is decommissioning our Boulder Municipal Airport. There's going to be an initiative on the ballot that proposes to do that, and the Boulder Chamber has, I will just be very clear, taken a strong position that we want to keep our airport. And so we have two great folks here who are going to chat with us about the airport, some of the important work that's happening there, and responding to some of the thoughts that others have offered around, well, why would you close the airport? Are they legitimate? So we have, first of all, we have Jan Burton, who is a former city council member. She also is an aviator herself, but very informed on this issue. And then we have Susan Churchill, who is the CEO of SHOTOVER. We're going to learn a little bit.
I wish I was the CEO, but I'm the CFO. So.
CFO, okay, so she controls the money, so she really
don't control them.
She has it all going. There you go. All right, so correction. CFO for SHOTOVER. We're going to learn about this really interesting company, sort of typical of the kinds of businesses that are associated with the airport. So to get our conversation started, I'm going to ask Jan, can you tell us just a little bit of background for folks in the audience of just what is happening? What is the history of our airport? What happens out there? Just so that they understand what's going on.
Okay. I'm happy to. And by the way, there's a new story that the Transportation Department of the city has put out that's a fantastic resource. So if you Google Boulder Airport story, you can find a lot about the history and background, and it's really a great resource. But the airport is one of the oldest in Colorado, originally called Hayden Field. It was a dirt strip. So celebrated, back in 96 years ago.
Wow. But
the Boulder city bought it in 1943 and then started to make improvements to it. This airport is truly a community airport. So it's got businesses, very viable businesses that rely on aviation, like SHOTOVER and others that I'll mention. It also has been important, as most people recognize, for safety of the community.
Yep.
It was the site of the second largest rescue mission for the Army Corps of Engineers after Katrina.
Wow. So
flood rescue, fire rescue, but it's also got a medevac. So people who need to be rescued from for medical purposes, the airport is used for that.
Gotcha.
It is also very critical for scientific research, scientific data, also flight instruction, recreation. It's a multi-purpose airport that really is, situated in the community.
I get you. So it's both an asset for folks who are using it as for utility, for flying, but sounds like there's a lot of business and maybe research activity happening out there. Well, can you tell us then, you're opposed to closing it? And I wonder if you can tell us, well, what are the major objections to eliminating this asset from our community?
Right. Well, first of all, I think the airport provides function, and we'll talk more about that. It provides function to businesses and individuals and scientific organizations, which is very tied to the Boulder economy, the whole scientific aspect. But secondly, I'm a common sense kind of person, and it's not common sense.
Yeah.
The idea is to close it for housing, but there are better places to put housing. Currently, as of, I guess, Saturday, we learned that the city is suing the FAA. Their defense attorneys will be the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice.
Yeah. Wow.
So, that's serious business.
Yeah.
So this is not a free and clear property that the city can turn into housing.
Sure.
Housing, if it would ever appear, would be at least 25 years from now. And how do we know what we'll need in the way of housing? And there are better places for housing.
Sure.
For example, the Alpine Balsam site that the city spent $42 million for, and it's just sitting as an empty field.
Yep.
That could be used for housing immediately. And why aren't we prioritizing that?
Good point.
Secondly, is we've got all kinds of plans to build out housing across the city. And then thirdly, we have the Area 3 Planning Reserve, which is got 500 acres, of which the city owns 200 acres. So that could be used for affordable housing.
Yeah, there's significant areas. And then, and I also think about East Boulder, where we just rezoned for, I think, 5,000 potential housing units.
Exactly.
So significant other housing. And then just maybe understanding of some of the other cost implications. I understand the property may have to be remediated. Is that a concern that you thought about?
Yeah, there are concerns, for example, if we decide to close the airport, we will not be able to accept grants from the FAA or from the Colorado Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
That means we'll use city taxes, our taxes, to pay for managing the airport for 18 years at least.
Wow.
Secondly, then we'll have to pay the FAA for land that they helped us buy.
Yeah.
Thirdly, there will be remediation of, if there's lead out there or other things from World War II operations.
Yeah.
So there's all kind of costs that come into closing the airport that make it into a not very common sense solution.
Yeah, not practical. Well, let's just talk to Susan then, just a little as an example of a business that operates out of that airport.
Yeah, you guys, thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.
We quietly do our thing, and we don't really spend a lot of time engaging in public discourse, so we're really grateful to have an opportunity to just articulate a little bit about what we do and how we need the Boulder Airport. And Jen, I really appreciate you, really being accurate about what happens at the Boulder Airport, because it's not, I think I've heard some people say, oh, this is an Aspen, this is for rich people, and really mischaracterize the airport. And I think one of the...
Or hobbyists.
Or hobbyists or something. And I think one of the things people forget is, first of all, we're never going to be an Aspen, simply our runway is too short. So we really are never going to have those jets and, be the land of the billionaire. So I think if anybody has fears about that, they can really lay those to rest, because that really isn't the Boulder Airport. So we are a small vet-owned, a little bit about SHOTOVER, we're a small vet-owned company. We've got about...
Veteran, not veterinarian.
Thank you, John.
Just
no, that's absolutely right. A veteran-owned business that's been around for 20 years. We have about 100 employees worldwide and 50 that work at our Boulder site. And we really value Boulder, especially those great institutions like CU Aerospace, where we get a lot of kids coming out of CU who are phenomenally trained, and we're so grateful to CU and to Mines and Colorado, or CSU and Front Range. Like, these are great institutions that produce a lot of graduates who we use as a business. Anyway, so SHOTOVER, what we do is we essentially have 4 product areas. The first one, probably what we're best known for, is our gimbals, or stabilized cameras that are attached to helicopters and aircraft, and are used in things like creative. So Top Gun, if you saw Top Gun Maverick, you saw SHOTOVER cameras in use, or if you've seen Charlie's Angels, or if you've seen Lord of the Rings, or if you like BBC wildlife documentaries, or you watch Red Bull things. These are all
That's where I spend my time.
Exactly. No, these are all using SHOTOVER cameras.
Wow.
The second product, so we have a lot of different cameras for a lot of different types of customers. The second product line we have is mission computers. And mission computers, really you're trying to simplify a lot of things for in aircraft, and make it so that tactical flight officer or the person in charge of the flight has the most operating informational and situational awareness they possibly can have. So, for example, if they're looking at a mudslide that's happened and destroyed a community, we can overlay synthetic data, and they can see what that land looked like before the disaster. And so they can locate victims of disasters quickly.
Wow.
Or if you are looking down at the land, you can see the streets overlaid. So we overlay information on live video through those mission computers. And a bunch of different industries that use them for various reasons. And our third category of products is just recorders. You've gone up, you've collected great information, we want to make sure you have those. And then the fourth line is we have sort of cloud-based video management solutions. You've gone up, you've collected this information, maybe you're using some of it for evidence, maybe you're using it for, for creating the next great documentary. This is a great cloud-based solution, which is searchable and wonderful, and that's called Earthscape.
Wow.
So we have this, and then we have a bunch of niche products, but those are our 4 main categories. And we're basically creating products for a lot of different industries. I mentioned the creative; those are filmmakers, animal, wildlife documentaries, broadcasters. So if you're getting traffic information, if you've ever watched the news and they show what's happening below, that's usually our cameras and our software, telling the world what's going on. And that has public safety implications. For example, in the California wildfires, where certain evacuation routes were blocked off because of fire, you really rely on those newscopters to give you different evacuation routes. So overlaying that street information is super important. So that's the broadcasting group. Utilities have a lot of assets to manage, and they want to manage them well. And if they don't manage them well, there's serious implications. So they need to manage pipelines. You don't want pipeline leaks. You want to manage all your transmission lines, because those are the things that are going to catch fire. You want to, again, like I mentioned this before, but you want to build ice roads so you're not, rolling over polar bear dens. There's some nice things like that. Basically, utilities really have to check their assets. They are really pro-safety, really proactive about trying to prevent tragedy and deliver power in the best way possible. So they are very, very keen to keep an eye on those assets.
Well, so let me ask you this.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
Sorry, I go off.
I tell you, it's fascinating, and I mean, I just understand too, wildlife protection, et cetera. So, what is the importance and value of having a local airport, and what happens to your business if, for some reason, the decision was to decommission the airport?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, John. And again, I really appreciate you asking that, because I've read people are saying, oh, well, businesses like you can just go to some other random airport and, experiment there. And the truth is, we try not to fly a lot. Just flying is expensive, and it's engineering time and pilot time and fuel costs. But we believe we have to test in the air. Ultimately, we're handing off equipment to airborne operators. There are things that you can only do in the air in terms of vibration, in terms of communication, back and forth downlinks, configuration. There's all sorts of reasons why you have to test in the air. And I think one thing, maybe people are scientists or engineers will understand that, but there is a lot of iteration that takes place in testing. So even before the plane gets off the ground for a normal weekly test flight, there might be several runs back and forth between the office while we install new things. We see configurations are wrong. We need to go back. We need to correct with maybe a software engineer who's in charge of that, get a new update. Maybe we need to get a connector, sort of maybe dumb stuff like that, but it's just a lot of back and forth. And when you start talking about round trips that are 40 minutes, like that's like delays each weekly test flight. Like now we can't run weekly flights at all. Like it becomes just a lot more, the iterations become longer. Our cycles.
So you're saying your location being very close basically on the Boulder Airport is really important.
It's really important. Even if we're not taking off in the air, again, just the back and forth of getting that plane. We have an experimental plane, and just making sure it's configured correctly.
To do the operation.
Does a lot.
So, well, let me ask you this. So.
Oh, and I have more, John.
Oh, okay.
Whoa. So there's the testing that is a lot of iterative, and then we have people coming and training from all around the world. So, for example, like the Irish police force arrives here, and we're doing classroom training, but then we want to take them up and have them operate instrumentation.
Equipment,
Maybe that's not a good example, but just basically TFOs or film documentary people. We want them to know and be able to be competent operating equipment before they leave Boulder.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt, but we use that airport a lot.
Yeah.
So,
no, I'm fascinated. I can't wait till after we get past this decommissioning thing to do a whole segment on your business, because it's fascinating. No, absolutely. So let me ask you just point blank, what happens if they decommission the Boulder Airport?
It's already started to factor a little bit in our decision making. Years ago, we approached the city. We were interested in building on the airport and housing our people there, who are mainly, again, sitting in front of computer screens. They're not flying all day.
Yeah.
And we just picked up vibes from the city that they weren't sure what to do with this. So it is this weird thing where, again, I have to de-risk our business a little bit and start thinking about moving manufacturing lines to other sites that we have. And it makes Boulder a less interesting place to hire. So absolutely it does. I mean, just to be honest with you, it does affect whether we continue to hire and build here.
And whether you stay.
Yeah, whether we stay ultimately. We start to kind of de-risk, meaning start to move people to different sites, start to wind things down.
So it's an unfortunate consequence of the hesitation around the future of the airport that this decommissioning talk has created.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're at hundreds of airports worldwide every year because we do installs all over the world. And I think one thing people don't realize living in Boulder is actually airports can be a phenomenal place for industry. And there's all sorts of things going around on in air travel. There's material sciences and composites like that. There's obviously all the fuel mixture things that people have talked about. There's, testing. There's, I'm just thinking about Diamond Aircraft in Austria is now using really fuel efficient engines in their craft, like almost on the order of electric car engines, right? So there's really exciting things happening in aviation that's going to make it a cleaner, more accessible industry. And there's the whole airport controversy around this is puzzling to me because I mean I look at CU as one of the great research towns in aerospace in the country, and to see that de-linked from the airport and people looking at the airport in a vacuum around the vibrant aerospace community around here is absolutely strange for me. So
I hear it. Well, I mean, that's a good segue to ask Jan, just thinking more broadly about the business activity at the airport. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know in that space?
Yeah, in addition to SHOTOVER, which is a wonderful business that most people in Boulder don't even know about, we've got NEON, which is a National Ecological Observatory Network, and they collect data all over the country to provide for scientific research. And they are based in Boulder with, I believe, more than 30 employees at the airport. So that's an example. Scientific Aviation, I think, is more well known in the community as a company that tracks emissions, climate emissions, and resolution around that. In fact, the airport is estimated to provide about $99 million worth of economic value to the Boulder community. A direct payroll of about 300 people. So it really is part of the employment. Susan told me when they fly all their customers in, they bring in lunch. So they are supplying.
We eat a lot.
Very good.
Local restaurants for sure.
Right. So that's a business trickle down into the restaurant industry. So that's just a great example of a lot of economic value per year. $96 million per year from the airport.
Right.
And Jan, that's that's just the Boulder community. Like I would argue that just our company alone, in terms of the value it's bringing the world, in terms of the environmental impact of helping some of these climate change problems, is like it's great. We're contributing to Boulder per se, our company alone, but I think the innovation coming out of it is actually more significant. It's really helping, like I think what a lot of people in Boulder value. And
which is a cornerstone of our economy, innovation.
So it's again, it's a little, a little disappointing that maybe I heard that the Boulder Airport. Look, I think hobbyist and general aviation is really important. It's where people learn to fly, and we need pilots, and so that's a really useful thing. But I would hate for the Boulder Airport to be described in those terms alone, because I think that really misrepresents what's going on in the Boulder Airport.
Really important. Well, let's hit a couple of other sort of criticisms or characterizations of the decommissioning effort that I think would be important for our viewers to understand. So first of all, there's been talk about the city would get rid of the airport and it could gain something like $400 million. Can you respond to that headline?
Right. I think that was printed in the paper maybe on last weekend.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. The Boulder Airport cannot be closed down for at least 18 years.
Yeah.
So we're going to be waiting for a while.
Yeah.
And the city has already signed up for litigation against the FAA. So there's going to be a lot of drawn out legal work that could potentially be done.
Yeah.
And that will cost money.
Yep.
The city will have to operate the airport without grants from the FAA and CDOT. There's a lot of money, remediation costs, et cetera, et cetera. So you look at the cost of development of any property in Boulder, because we all know that developing in the city of Boulder is very expensive.
Yep.
So if you talk to any developer, what they're going to tell you is that taking the land out there after remediation and developing the infrastructure that would be needed, like electrical and sewers and water and streets and all that, you add that to the cost of housing, and I can give anyone details on this if they're interested.
Yeah.
It's $1 billion.
Wow.
It's $1 billion.
Okay.
So then add to that the cost of land. So if the city makes $400 million selling the land, there's absolutely no way there would be affordable housing.
Yeah.
Because a developer cannot pay out $1 billion and then build affordable housing. That doesn't pencil out.
Yep.
So that is not a possibility. It's not a possibility.
And I heard that we'll have to pay anyway some amount of money to the FAA to get back the land.
That's right. It was estimated in 2018 that at those dollars it would be $106 million. So it's anyone's guess, how much the land value will go up between now and when it can be closed in 2040 at the very earliest. But that's $250, $300 million, right?
Yeah.
At least. So the city will have to pay that to the FAA.
Right.
So this is not a cheap undertaking. It's not inexpensive. It is not something that can happen very easily, and it's not something the city is going to make money on.
Yeah.
At all.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And Jan, one of the things, obviously I'm a resident of Boulder, and obviously municipalization was a real blow. $30 million wasted. And I think for me, one thing being in the aviation industry is every time something goes wrong, we really do a deep dive into what went wrong. And we really try to understand it because it's not only resources, but it's people's lives. So you really want to understand. And I guess just as a citizen, I would love the city of Boulder to really do a deep dive into what went wrong with the decision making for municipalization. Because I feel like, this is less than 10 years later, the city is about to embark on the same mistakes. And as a taxpayer, I really have a lot of desires. I want to see public transportation. I want to see us have an incredible rail system. I've got a lot of things I want to see. My kids went through public education here through BBSD. There's just a lot of city infrastructure that I really think we need to invest in. There's a lot of problems that we really have. And I would just love it if someone would reflect back on that mistake.
Yep.
And again, it seems like we're doing mistake 2.0.
Yeah.
And if we could just kind of look back at that and say, hey, what did we learn? Where was the misinformation? What facts didn't we gather before we pursued a reckless legal course of action, which I think, in terms of the expenses for consultants and lawyers, we really essentially endured as taxpayers before. How can we avoid that?
And I want to make one point is that was funded because we as the voters voted ourselves a tax to pay for that legal thing.
Right.
This FAA is unfunded because no one has stepped forward and say, we'll pay for this, or we have a plan
For the lawsuit, pay for the lawsuit.
yeah.
Jen, it's funny because the municipalization was funded, but again, one thing I have a concern with is also just when you politicize stuff where you haven't really uncovered the facts.
Right.
I mean, I think you just owe it to the voters to really, really dig into the facts, really understand the economics behind this. And then you really get your answers and it's a little clearer and maybe it doesn't have to be politicized. I mean, the city hired some consultants. I can tell you as a business, contributing a lot of taxpayers to the city of Boulder. We were never contacted. So, here's one entity that never heard from the consultants. I have no idea. I don't know whether they just showed up on a Sunday afternoon at the Boulder Airport and talked to random people. It's pretty striking to me that the people I know in business around the airport were never consulted. So that already concerns me, that the fact finding is just not there. And again, as a taxpayer, I guess if I lived in Broomfield or Longmont, I might not care. I live in Boulder, I pay taxes here. That's a bummer. And again, there's so many things that the city of Boulder needs to do. There's so many worthwhile causes. And I love the city of Boulder. I think there's so many great things they can do, but I just hate to see resources poorly spent.
Well, I'd like to kind of summarize too, because you and I were talking before this started, that you care about affordable housing.
I do, very much
because
so.
you have employees who would like to live here. We care, everyone at the airport cares about affordable housing. The chamber and all of your members have always cared about affordable housing. So this is not a question of do we want affordable housing or do we want the airport?
Yeah.
The question is about the possibilities of where are the best places to build housing, and it's not ripping the airport out.
Yeah.
We have alternatives. We have plans already in place in a number of places, like the East Boulder Community Sub-Community Plan.
Yeah.
We have a number of locations where housing can be built. We can do infill. We don't need to rip out a perfectly good airport with unknown costs and an unknown plan in order to create housing.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because I think one thing just in general in American political discourse is you don't want to misportray things and make villains where there's not villains, because I don't think, like you said, everybody wants to see more affordable housing. That's not what's up issue here. This is about really actually being a good steward of public resources. And I think that is, again, as a voter, I would love just to have the city, have the community really take a breath and really understand this process a little more.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, this is all part of that, Susan.
Yeah.
And so I just say I have just kept my mouth shut because I've so appreciated the dialogue and the information you two provided. And we want to make sure that the citizens of Boulder, the voting citizens, understand the complexity of this decision that they would be making and probably the very negative ramifications. As you said, Jan, it's not really about housing because we have great alternatives, but it would be a very potentially costly endeavor for us, let alone the economic benefits and the impacts on businesses that are doing important work. So you guys well articulated that. So I thank you so much for being with us. Susan Churchill, the CFO of SHOTOVER, and Jan Burton, former council member, former business leader, international business leader, and just great friend. And so just wonderful talking with you, and thank you so much for being with us. And we'll see all of you next time on Chamber Chat.